Welcome back everybody, and this should be the final video in which I talk specifically about the Codex-es in this series. Now, I already gone over the Horde Codex-es, which had the Orcs, Tyrannus, and Imperial Guard. And I went over the more mid-level trickery kind of Codex-es that had the Eldar and such. But now, we're going to talk specifically about Space Marines. There are several different types of Space Marine armies. 6 to be exact. So this video is going to be specifically about them. Fortunately, they are the last Codex-es I need to go through. So since we got a lot to go through, let's just get started. I'm going to start with the basic Space Marine Codex. Now, a lot of people refer to this codex as the bland Space Marines, which isn't really a fair title to give it. Because this is supposed to kind of be like the general rules for all different types of Space Marine chapters. But it also offers a lot of versatility. Now, depending on the type of army you want to play, whether you want to play a more like a faster style, a more powerful style, multiple units, fewer units but more powerful, this codex will give you that kind of versatility. And this codex also has several different type of hero type units you can use to help actually change some of the rules for your Space Marine army, which again adds to the different ways you could play this army. But Space Marines in general, they are powerful units. They're good shots, they're really good in melee, they got strong armor, they're really tough to hurt. They have some pretty good vehicles, and ultimately the only downside there is to the Space Marines are their point values. Because these units are so good, they're going to cost a lot of points, so 9 times out of 10, you're going to be outnumbered. But even though these units are going to be outnumbered, they're still going to be a really tough army to take down. This codex offers you units that could scout, so you could move around the board, outflank your enemies, use high-powered sniper rifles if you want, or sneak up for a melee attack. It has faster units for jump packs and turbo bikes. It has heavy long-range weapon units, Psyker units, or more particularly just a PsyQ hero unit, or HQ. Strong vehicles, and really I could just go on how awesome these guys are, but just keep in mind, you will be outnumbered. And if you like reading a lot of Space Marine novels, or just have a particular Space Marine series you like to go through, and if there isn't a specific codex for the army you like to read about, the Space Marine Codex is the best way to recreate that army. Now, enough about this, let's start talking about the more particular Space Marines. Now, I already mentioned that the Space Marines are good in melee and range and all that stuff. There are some codexes for Space Marines that seem to focus more on melee attacks, which brings us to the Blood Angels. Now, the Blood Angels play very similar to the basic Space Marines, except they have some extra special rules and disadvantages. One of the special rules is there's a small chance that most of their units will get a strength bonus when they go into a melee attack. It's called the Red Thirst, and you gotta roll for it at the beginning of the game. And there's a very low chance you will get it, but it's still there and it's still helpful when you do. And as far as troop choices go, the Blood Angels allows you to take the jump pack troops as your basic troop forces. So if you like the idea of having a lot of jump pack units, the Blood Angels would be the best choice for that. They also allow a lot of their vehicles to be considered fast vehicles, which allow them to move around the board at much greater distances with fewer disadvantages. So as far as speed goes, the Blood Angels are probably the fastest Space Marine army. But they're also not the only melee-focused army. Next are going to be the Space Wolves. Space Wolves are a very popular army because they're kind of like Viking versions of Space Marines, and they have kind of a wolf fetish. Now, this army does play a lot more differently than the basic Space Marines and Blood Angels, but as far as abilities go, they're still just as tough and just as dangerous as any other Space Marine. But they do seem to focus more on getting into melee range. But they don't have the speed that the Blood Angels have. They do have a different kind of command structure when it comes to adding leader units to different squads. While in other Space Marine codexes, they're automatic, you gotta add them with the Space Wolves, and these particular leader units do have a lot more options as far as upgrades go. In fact, a lot of units in the Space Wolves do have more options when it comes to upgrades. So if you're looking for a more melee-focused army that's a lot more customizable as far as upgrades go, and has like very special, specific abilities that you will only get with the Space Wolves because of their little wolf fetish, And of course, if the idea of having Space Marines riding giant wolves into battle appeal to you, Space Wolves, they're a good choice. Now the next codex I'm not too familiar with. I have picked it up recently and I've been going through it. It's the Black Templars. Now from what I could gather, they're probably another melee focused codex. There are a lot of units that seem to focus on melee, but they do have a lot of good ranged units. Now, the only real downside of the Black Templars is that this is a pretty old codex that desperately needs an upgrade. Some of the point values are a little bit skewed over with the Black Templars. It's gotten a lot cheaper with recent Space Marine codexes. So you'll be more outnumbered than normal if you use the Black Templars. But they do have some special abilities and units that you're not going to get anywhere else. One thing, if you like the idea of having a lot of combat servitors, you get Tech Marines that can have more specialized servitors to help them out. Other Space Marine codexes do get servitors to help out the Tech Marines, but the Black Templars get more options when it comes to their servitors. And I know that's not a really big incentive to get into Black Templars. But their special units could get some special item code like Holy Relics that allows them to reroll dice for any unit on the board in case you end up getting a plasma warp and blowing up in your face and you want to reroll that. Additionally, Black Templars get a special HQ unit called Champion, I believe. And Emperor's Champion, sorry. And with this unit, which, depending on the size of your army, is going to be mandatory for you to take, you could get a special vow that will help give a boost to your entire army, such as making them more resistant to psychic powers, or giving them special bonuses when they go into melee attacks. And I forgot to mention that Black Templars do not like Psychers. In fact, they don't have any librarians in this codex. You're not allowed to have ally librarians with the Black Templars. They don't like them that much. But because this is an older codex, there are a few units, such as their Terminator units, that you could customize a little bit more because it hasn't been upgraded and limited like it has in the more recent codexes. So some squads, and especially their troop squads that have tactical marines and the equivalent to scouts combined in one squad, you're only going to be able to get to the Black Templars. Now, if you like the idea of having a huge Terminator-style army, that's where you get your Grey Knights. Now, in some of the other codexes, such as the Space Wolves and the Dark Angels that I'm going to talk about soon, you could get a Terminator-only army, but you need a special hero unit in order to do that. Grey Knights, their Terminator units are their basic troop units. This is probably the most expensive Space Marine army you're going to be able to find. And their Space Marine units are probably a lot more powerful than any other of the Space Marines. So you really do get what you pay for with the Grey Knights. They're also the only Space Marine army that has Inquisition units. And Inquisition henchmen, such as the Assassins for the Inquisition, which could be really deadly. Not to mention, Grey Knights also get bonuses against demon-type enemies. So if you want a pure powerhouse of an army that uses a lot of really big, heavy, expensive units, Grey Knights are the best choice for that. Now, lastly, the latest codex is the Dark Angels Codex. I already talked about how the Blood Angels and Space Wolves are more melee focused. Dark Angels seem to be more hit and run, range focused. Now the Dark Angels seem to focus more on speed, not so much with jump packs, but with their turbo bikes and their land speeders, and they even get some very specific kind of plane or flyer units that are specific to the Dark Angels. So this is another very fast army that seems to focus more on ranged attacks than on melee attacks, although they are still pretty good in melee attacks. And they do offer a little bit of versatility in your basic units, seeing as how in a lot of the other codexes, the sergeant unit or the leader unit for each squad is pretty much mandatory, while it's not in this codex. In fact, you need to upgrade a character to become the sergeant, or veteran sergeant rather. Additionally, the Dark Angels also get very specific type of bike units, not just the regular Space Marine motorbikes or scouts. And if you're thinking of making maybe like a White Scars Space Marine army, if you're into those White Scar books, Dark Angels is probably the best choice if you just want to paint them white instead of instead of the Dark Angels color. And the Dark Angels are probably right now the cheapest point value Space Marine units right next to the Space Wolves. So if you're looking for a powerhouse squad that focuses on speed and range, Dark Angels will be a perfect choice. But that doesn't mean you have to use speed and range for the Dark Angels. Because as I mentioned before, you could make a Terminator-only army if you pick their special hero unit for that. But really, that's your choice. And that's all I really got left to say on the Space Marine Codexes. So I hope these videos have helped you try to figure out what kind of army you want, or to even see if this is a game that you want to get into. There's still a lot more you need to learn, and really it's probably best you learn on your own. But if you still need some help, I might make some more videos to try to help flush this out more, go over the specific rules in the rulebook that might be a little bit confusing. And if you have any more questions regarding any of this stuff, feel free to send me an email or send me a comment, and I'll try to get back to you on it. For now, those have been my opinions. Take them for what they're worth.